What's up? We got The Flash, Season 3, Episode 2, Paradox. So this episode starts off with Barry monologuing while he goes to Star Stadium with Felicity. And Felicity's and he tries to explain everything about Flashpoint to Felicity, and Felicity's like, hold up, wait a minute. Calm down, Barry. You're going a little bit too fast. And she's like, so he's like, you went back in time, stopped your mom for your mom lived for a few months, and then changed everything back to the way it was, came back and noticed things were different. And he's like, yeah, he's like, run her through it. So he's like, yeah, before you can learn changes, he had to stop a thief. And they're like, hey, Cisco comes up names, and Cisco's like, yeah, thief, he robs stuff, let's just call him Thief. And they're like, yeah, and he's like, what's going on with Cisco? And he's like, Barry, your jokes are not that funny. So then we go into Joe and Iris. Joe and Iris kind of moved out of the West House. Does that mean, where is she living? If she she also promised never to step foot in the house again. So where does she live? The show never acknowledges this. Like, the show never says, oh, in this new timeline, Iris lives here. They never say it. It's never brought up. So where does Iris live? It's never brought up. So anyway, so it's suspected we're into the whole. So they're like, we also learned about. So Barry mentioned. Barry makes this joke. Says Joe's like, Captain wants to. He's like, Captain sings back, and Joe's like, where would he go? So we meet Julian Albert, played by Draco Malfoy himself, Tom Felton. Yeah, they got Draco Malfoy to be in this show. And even after this season, Draco Malfoy, Anyway, I'll just mention that later when we get to the end of the season. But anyway, so he's like, who are you, Julian Albert, CSI Human Specialist? And he's like, meh. CSI Con was like, oh. He's like, I don't like you, Mr. Allen. So Barry goes to a grief counseling session where we learn that Dante was killed by a drunk. Cisco's brother Dante was killed by a drunk driver. Sorry for my glasses all being up, but he was killed by a drunk driver, and Cisco is mad at Barry for some reason. We don't know. He just doesn't like to talk. He only likes to talk only looks at Barry when the other team is around. And even Barry notices this, but Barry notices there's something up with Dig's picture. He's like, who's that young boy with Dig? And Felicity's like, he didn't have a kid before? And he's like, yeah, baby Sarah. And she's like, that's baby John. Okay, Barry, you just gender swapped child with Diggle. You just changed Diggle's whole child. So there's a lot of things that I was thinking, like, does that mean Sarah never died? That means Sarah never died in this new timeline? Because if she still died and Diggle had daughter to honor Sarah, right? Remember? But if Barry undid that, if Barry ran back in time to save his mom, causing Diggle to end, Diggle and I would have a son instead, named baby John, what does that mean? Does that mean Sarah never got killed by Malcolm Merlin? Or he did, or she still was resurrected? I'm so confused on this whole thing. Did she, she still died, we all know, but anyway, so then we see Edward Claris, and he's getting memories of Flashpoint. So then we see a new villain named Alchemy, and Cisco, and he's like, I can give you back your powers from Flashpoint. Basically doing his best doing his best raspy voice impression. And he's like, you can have your speedster powers, and you will prove that you have no rival. So basically, Barry tries to get Joe and Iris to talk again by having all the Team Flash meet up. But they're like, yeah, they're like, we don't want to meet up. Like, they're like, we don't want to meet up. Like, and he's like, so they're, we don't want to meet up. But Barry's like, hey, and Barry also makes it thing, and he's like, yeah. I like the joke where Barry's like, like he says he wants to write the story about the Husks, but he said about the Husks that he and Julian are looking into, and he's like, you meant Julian, and Barry says, I don't like that. I don't like Julian. And Iris like, you always say that. Because, like, I know why he always says that. Julian's the worst. He's written to be the worst. But I'm guessing they're probably going to make him likable. So then Clara shows up, and he's like, Clara? And he's like, so you do remember Flash? He's like, I remember you too. You changed the timeline, because now that in the other life, it was just him and that smart ass kid Flash, until you decided to change everything and ruin his life. And Barry's like, hold up, I didn't ruin your life. And he's like, yeah, you did. And he's like, now I have a right. Now I can be your rival now. So they basically speak. So Barry gets stole the husk of Clarence from Julian, and then goes to him and says, hey, I need them from Edward Clarence. And so he's like, here. So then Barry, so then what happens is that Barry revisits where Clarence is, and that he explains that when he went back, he's like, you went back to save your mom, and he's like, yeah, he went back to save his mom. That's the point from their former timeline, and Barry went back in time, creating another timeline, flashpoint. But then he went back. This whole timeline stuff is so confusing. They just keep changing the timeline so much, it's so confusing. And so he's like, so he's like, you can change the timeline and save your So Barry decides to go back in time to save Dante, but that's when the real Jay, I'm going to call him the real Jay Garrick. The real Jay Garrick, aka John Wesley Ship, shows up, and he's like, Flash, and like put these on. And then he takes him to a diner where Dawson's Creek is playing, because, obviously Dawson's Creek, he takes him to 1998 when Dawson's Creek was still popular, and basically explains Barry, the timeline is like a teacup. You try to go back in time, you break the teacup, and then when you try to fix the timeline, but you can't, and you try to fix the teacup, but there's still a little fracture in the teacup in the timeline. So Barry tells them all about Flashpoint, and he's like, I guess you guys don't want to know about your Flashpoint lives, and all the Flashpoint lives. Wise Kid Flash, Iris and Joe. Iris was a reporter, Joe was an alcoholic, and Cisco was a millionaire, and Caitlin was an eye doctor. So they decide to. So Cisco. So like, you can go back in time to save your family, but what matters to my brother, it doesn't matter. And he's like, Cisco, I can't just do that. And he's like, you really want me to go back and save Dante? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, Cisco, if he did that, it would change the timeline. And he's like, he doesn't care. he just wants his brother back. Yeah. So, yeah. So Alex basically makes a good point. He's like, Cisco, you be mad at Barry, but remember when you had to force Barry's identity to save your brother from Captain Cold? And he's like, that was a rookie mistake. And he's like, guys, we're a family, and family makes mistakes. Families mad, angry at each other, but families also can forgive. So verse 5. So I want to say verse 5. The rival, because I'm so confused at every speech that shows up in the show by this point, takes Barry to Alchemy, and she's like, Barry, you had a friend, so do I. And Black Alchemy, he's like, who are you? He's like, he's Alchemy, and has the, and yeah, so then Barry's about to be killed, and he's like, I have no rival, but then Cisco's like, stay away from his friend. Yeah, so yeah, so now Team Flash is back, but then it's also revealed that Barry's like, hey, and he's like, yeah, and he's like, hey, you could be moonlighting as an ophthalmologist, and she's like, oh, what? And he's like, yeah, that's just a Flashpoint joke. And then Caitlin reveals to be a has Killer Frost ice powers. Does that mean Caitlin this whole season will be whether or not Caitlin will become Killer Frost or not? And then Julian's like, hey Barry, guess what? Guess what, Barry? I know you lied to me, because how would you have gotten the name of Edward Claris? That means you stole a sample from the CSI lab, from your own job. And he's like, yeah, and he's like, I don't trust you, Barry, and I don't like things I don't trust. So, yeah, so then we see, and he's like, and then we see Alchemy just in a cell, probably at Iron Heights or something, because they can't handle the Star Lab. And then what happens is that then Alchemy's, and he's like, Alchemy, and he's like, you failed, Claire. And then a hand comes out to end the episode. Who's that hand? So, I gotta say, I enjoyed this episode. It was kind of disappointing that, as people say, Flashpoint could have been longer. Like, Barry could have, like, it could have been is that Barry, like, could have stayed in Flashpoint a little bit longer and then realized that he was doing was wrong, but no, it's only one episode. The hype was not hyped. And then this episode, we learned that Barry made it so Diggle had a son instead of a daughter. He had baby John instead of baby Sarah, which does that mean Sarah, the previous timeline, Sarah was killed, and that's why baby Sarah was named after Sarah. But in this timeline, does that still happen? But Diggle doesn't name his son baby Sarah. He names him John Jr. I'm kind of confused about that one. And Diggle doesn't remember having a daughter at all. He just remembers having a son, because Barry Thanos snapped away his daughter and replaced her with a son. But anyway, that was it for this video, and I'll see you next time for more of The Fly. See you next time.